Hi, my name is Tom and welcome to my channel, Integral Views. Do you ever get the feeling like I do that British citizens are being scammed in every sense with regard to immigration, basically lied to, never told the full truth? So one area that's really important in this regard is international students. So we're often told that international students are a big economic boost for the UK economy and that we should welcome them basically in seemingly unlimited numbers. And in 2019, the government started basically competing with other countries to attract international students to the UK. And they represented a large part of what's referred to as the Boris wave, where we saw more than 1 million immigrants coming to the UK every single year. And in my opinion, far too little conversation takes place with regard to international students. They represent the majority of immigrants coming into the UK. And the narrative goes, well, they'll study in higher education, get good qualifications, and then they'll move into the workforce and be a continuous benefit economically to the UK. So what's not to love, right? But we've imported international students and many different types of immigrants into the UK at historically unprecedented levels over the last decade or more. And the UK economy is failing. So if the logic is correct that it will be a boost to the UK economy, how can this be possible, right? So in this video, I'm going to talk about how that's possible, how misleading information is put out by the government, how no one's connecting the dots, and the reality with regard to international students in the UK. So having completed my 7-part series on illegal migration in the UK, this is now my first in a new video series on legal migration as promised. So what I'll do is I'll put the link to the playlist for the illegal migration playlist in the description of the video, and I'll put a link to the playlist that this video is the first part of on legal migration as a pinned comment on this video. And in this video series, I'm going to talk about the true economic cost, the cultural impact, really important topics like remittances, money sent out from the UK by migrants to their home countries. 35% of the entirety of the Somalian economy is based on remittances. So it's a big issue, okay? Then also things like, the impact on the workforce, how native citizens are pushed down further into lower levels in workforces due to DEI policies. And eventually, I'm going to try to show that the government deficit, the entire deficit the government has, which is a gap between what it spends and what it takes in, can be attributed to migration. And therefore, a huge portion of the government debt can be attributed to this mass migration experiment that we've been running. Let's get started then with looking at how things are right now. So luckily, the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, produced some new data a couple of days ago, November 27th, long-term international migration data. And in this package, there's some interesting things. First of all, immigration into the United Kingdom remains very high. It's 898,000 people who came into the UK last year. And yet the Home Office is talking about very low net migration figures, yeah? So look at this. The interesting thing, by the way, about this tweet that the Home Office released is it had 112,000 views, okay, but only 154 likes. I guess that's 154 Home Office staff. But they say net migration is at its lowest level in half a decade. How can that be true when there are 898,000 people coming into the UK in 1 year in that same data set? Well, it's as a result of emigration, people leaving the UK. So we saw huge numbers of people leaving the United Kingdom. I think it's around 650,000. But a lot of those, as you can see in this chart, are EU nationals, so EU citizens, and British people who are leaving the UK at very high levels, right? And so when you have so many people abandoning ship and leaving the UK, even though you've got absolutely historically unprecedented levels of people coming into the country, often from non-EU countries, mostly from non-EU countries, right? When you have this, it balances out, and then you get this figure that is a low net migration figure that the Home Office can brag about. Just some figures on the number of people to clarify, actually. So it's 693,000 people who left the United Kingdom in that 1 year ending June 2025. 693,000 people left, okay? Of those, 286,000 were non-EU people. So those were like students who would have left. Yeah, no, it's actually not that frequent that they will leave, but 286,000 people did leave non-EU, and then you've got 252,000 who are British, and 252,000 British people left the country last year. 155,000 EU citizens also left. But what that basically leaves us with, right, is that we saw a net increase of non-EU migrants of 393,000 in that 1 year that the Home Office is bragging about. So 393,000 new people coming into the UK from outside of the EU. But what this video is really about is international students, okay? Because they make up the majority of immigrants, people coming into the United Kingdom. So we've got to understand what's happening there, right? And I don't think people talk about international students enough. Hopefully this contributes toward that conversation, kicking off a little bit more. To give some context for this chart here shows the breakup of people who came into the UK. This is long-term immigration. And it's split by country. You can see work and then study, and you can see study related is by far the biggest group. So for some context here, okay, within 5 years ending June 2025, 513,000 international students just from India came to the United Kingdom. That's more than 500,000 in 5 years just from one country, just from India. By the way, 75% or thereabouts, 75% of those international students coming from India, they study master's degrees, 1 year master's degrees, okay? And given that India leads the pack with regard to international students, we're going to specifically focus on India and the international students coming from India to be a bit specific, so we don't look at other countries like Nigeria, etc. But the same kind of can apply to lots of other countries as well. I want to start this just by looking at this article quick. So this is Hidden in Plain Sight, the real international student scandal. What this talks about, you can go and have a look at it yourself, but what it talks about overall is the fact that a lot of students coming to the UK don't even speak English. They don't speak English even at the end of their studies, and that raises quite a lot of questions, doesn't it? By the way, this is from the Higher Education Policy Institute, and I'll read through just a little snippet from it. Master's level teaching used to be rich, challenging and enjoyable, but now a master's seminar in the disciplines that we both teach typically involves a cohort in which 3/4 of the students, and often more, are from a single country. 3/4 or more from a single country. A few are international students from elsewhere, and 1 or 2 are home students. On the master's programs in our department, only a very small number of students typically have the English language skills necessary for engaging in meaningful seminar discussions. Furthermore, there are increasing numbers of students who are not engaged at all in the learning process. So they can't speak English and they're not engaged in the learning process very often. What I'll show is that this is an industry. The first thing to know is that a lot of these master's programs are not actually taught at the university themselves. They're taught in what's called franchises. So we have around 355 franchise colleges around the UK, and they're accredited by universities. These franchises are businesses, okay? And the universities themselves often rely on the income from these franchises because international student fees are uncapped, whereas national student fees for British citizens here are capped. So the universities themselves financially depend partly on these franchises getting students and then basically charging them a lot. As such, those universities that accredit these master's degree programs through these franchises, they are dependent on those franchises. They are incentivized to maximize those franchises for their income. And this rabbit hole goes quite deep, but it's really important to understand because this is driving mass migration in the United Kingdom. So let's make sure we understand it, right? So basically, the Office for Students, the OFS, is a regulator for those universities, okay, and for a lot of that higher education. Almost 2/3 of the franchised providers, so of those 355 franchises, almost 2/3 of them are not registered with the OFS, who regulates and ensures standards of learning on the courses. 2/3 not registered at all. And the way that works is that the university will basically be audited and regulated by the OFS, so they'll have a great interest in what the university's doing. And then it's the university's responsibility to make sure that these franchises that they're accrediting courses for, right, who are doing these master's degree programs, that those are maintaining high levels of educational standards, okay? So it's the university's responsibility. But those same universities are incentivized to maximize them. So they're not incentivized to crack down in a very harsh way, are they? But some of those franchised colleges are registered with the OFS, and the OFS has done some kind of checks, audits, to check the standards of learning within some of those franchised colleges. And we'll look at two of those quickly now. By the way, these are the only two that I could find with regard to these franchised colleges, okay? So this is one of those reports from the OFS, and it is for RTC Education Limited. And now this shows all of the concerns that the report brought up. There is too much here for me to go through, but a lot of issues, okay? Have a read through that. You can pause and read through it. It's very concerning. One comment that I want to pull out of this is here. It says, in the assessments team's view, relevant awards granted to students were therefore not always credible. So the awards, the qualifications, weren't credible. This is because in the findings of the assessment team, as set out under paragraphs 280 to 284 above, students were not assessed effectively and assessments were not always valid and reliable. Now, if this is an industry, they're incentivized to get people qualified, aren't they? But we know a lot of these students don't even speak English. By the way, just quickly with regard to this RTC Education Limited, I went and looked at them on Companies House, and all I'll say is that a lot of the names of the officers, they don't sound British. And those are the people who own and are running this college, this franchised college. And then the second one is this. It is Bradford College, okay? And there were some failures, some concerns by the OFS. And I'll just show this here, but I won't go through it in detail. And just quickly, this is all of the reviews that happened in the set that I looked at, 2022 to 2023, okay? So this is the OFS going in and checking. And most of these big universities, every one that I checked was completely fine. But these two colleges that are these franchise colleges stood out with these bad results. Now let's take this to the next level. A lot of these franchise colleges have agents that work on commission. So there will be people employed by the college who work on commission to go and find people to basically join the course. They'll slot them into whatever course they are most likely to be able to get into, okay? And they're basically incentivized through commission. Now, some of those workers themselves may have been students on that course in the past who have moved into working in that agent. You can see how it could be this pyramid scheme, okay? Certainly by the numbers, it seems to be something like that going on. One thing I want to say is it really seems in looking at all of this that it's very unregulated. No one has the capacity to go through and check all of these colleges, but we should. It's only 355, right? So let's make sure that what's happening is above board, right? Now I want to pivot to this Financial Times article that gives this perspective from someone from India who basically feels they got scammed by these agents and these institutions. The really interesting thing about this article is that it's basically it's very much focused on the person from India and, you know, the student's terrible experience, but it's not focused whatsoever on what the impact of this whole industry is on the United Kingdom. So let's have a quick read through some of this. Ajit left his village in southern India for Oxford, hoping for better opportunities, but within days of arriving in 2022, he discovered the recruitment agent who found him a course had sold him fake promises. The 27-year-old, an agent in Study in UK in Tamil Nadu, told him that Oxford Brookes was part of Oxford University and that he was guaranteed an automatic extension of his post-study work visa. They told me I will stay for 5 years and then I can go directly onto indefinite leave to remain, which is a fake promise, Ajit told the Financial Times. So basically what they're doing is they're selling routes into the United Kingdom. The entire student visa route, in my opinion, is basically an industry that's selling routes in through the migration system into the United Kingdom, and it's completely out of control. It's the majority of immigration into the UK. Check this out. Rates for agents have historically been between 10 and 30% of the recruit's first-year tuition fee, according to experts, which can be a range as high as $60,000 a year depending on the course and institution. I'm just focusing on master's degrees. This applies for many different types of qualification, but that's a lot of money that these people are incentivized to do. So it's a whole industry of let's get as many people as we can, and then they can go on to courses and I'm on commission, right? And the universities benefit from it as well because they depend on those high international fees. So everyone's winning, right? Well, we'll see. Ajit certainly isn't winning. Ajit, who asked that his real name not be published, so that's not even his name, said he used study in, previously named SIUK, to apply to 7 British universities, paying a small handling fee after securing an unconditional offer from Oxford Brookes. His tuition fee was about $16,000 a year. Founded in 2006, Study in processed 210,000 UK university applications by foreign students in the year to March 2025. The consultancy is headquartered in London, but has 100 offices in 45 countries. And this is really interesting. A lot of this is operating out of the UK. One quick comment, right? In the UK, you're allowed to work while you study if you're a foreign student coming to the UK, certain number of hours, okay? And then we have this kind of graduate to worker scheme. You have a certain amount of time on that, and then you can apply for other jobs and get higher salaries, and then you're golden, okay? But basically, so Fernandez said agents suggested she would instantly find part-time work to start paying down her £14,400 loan for tuition fees alongside her course. So that's enough from the Financial Times article. Hopefully that's painting a picture. So the thing is that basically they will take on this debt, right? So you got Ajit, he's in a village in southern India, right? And he's taking on this massive debt to make a go of it to come to the UK, okay? But all of that debt will be paid out of work done in the UK economy. It's not money coming from somewhere else, typically. So where is this money coming from for Ajit and from hundreds of thousands of people in India to get the money to pay for these expensive student loans, right? So what we can piece together to some extent is that in India, there's at least 8 billion that is for overseas student loans that sit within, basically some of it is the state-owned entities, so government state-owned financial entities, and some of it is other kinds of funding, other kinds of banks, etc. And this is growing by 20% every single year. 1 in 7 Indian international students studies in the United Kingdom out of all of them in the world, right? So 1 in 7 is here in the UK. And that means there would be approximately £1.12 billion plus in overseas student loans from India given to Indian citizens to come and study in the UK. And those loans are often given at quite high interest rates, like 10%, for example, up to 12% even. So just think about this for a second. So you've got Ajit in his village in southern India, and he wants to make a go of it in the United Kingdom, but he doesn't have anything, right? So he's given a loan, and then he comes here, and the collateral, basically the basis of that loan, is on future earnings in the UK economy. So I'll lend you this money, you'll go to the United Kingdom, you'll do your 1 year's master's degree, you'll have that on your CV, you'll enter the workforce, and then you'll pay the loan back to India. And all of that money is money leaving the UK. The money for the tuition fees came from India, so that's coming in, but then money went back out to pay the loan plus the interest. So we're losing 10% of that money out of the UK economy. But this is incredibly murky, and I really tried my best to get an understanding of this, yeah? It is clearly a huge industry. So all of this is debt. It's debt. A lot of it is from Indian entities themselves that are connected to the state, a lot of banks in the public sector, private sector as well. But we know for sure that in addition to this, there is a lot of this money that's coming from personal loans, loans against houses, again, loans based in India. So those loans as well might be quite high interest, and then they will need to be paid to India, and the interest, that's basically money that's generated in the UK economy in jobs here that's sent out of the country to pay debt in India. Of course, the fees do come in, right? So the university fees come in for the master's degree program, but there's still a net outflow because you've got the interest. Hope that made sense. And just to point out, I got a lot of this information from this industry report on assessment of education loans in India, CRISIL. And I just want to put this out. So overseas education loan portfolio witnessed an exponential 32.8% CAGR between 31st March 2019 and 31st December 2023. It's just going way, way up, right? So that is where I got those billions from, those figures from. Just want to point out really quickly here as well, in the same report, it shows India's economy is booming. So India showed 7.8% GDP growth. And in the same chart, look at the UK down there on the right, 0.1%. So we're not doing so well, and India's doing really great. Just to make that crystal clear, what I'm saying is state-owned entities in India provide these student loans, and they profit off the work that Indian students then do in the United Kingdom economy. That's the interest of the loan. So they profit, they're incentivized to create these loans, send people out to the UK who then study, but they also work. And that work then pays for the interest for their loans. As I said before, this is a huge industry, okay? So it's not just entities in India who are doing this, either through kind of specific education loans or personal loans or loans against properties, okay? But also entities in the United Kingdom itself are at it as well, financing this. One example is this company I found called Prodigy Finance. So again, they're specialized in this whole industry. And here's an example of some things on their website. Working during your degree, so it explains that. Bringing dependents, that's fine. Post-study opportunities goes through that. Maintaining your visa and traveling safely. And then how this supports your funding journey. Prodigy Finance loans help students from around the world access leading UK universities without collateral or a co-signer for your main product. So what that means is you don't need collateral for the loan. You don't need a co-signer. We just give you the money, and then that's secured on your potential future earnings in the United Kingdom. But this is where it gets much worse when you zoom out and start to look at the impact, connect the dots across the UK economy. So from Q2 2019 to Q2 2025, okay, we increased the number of people in work, the number of jobs increased by 1.1 million approximately, okay? So that's an increase in the jobs. But during the same time, we imported over 3 million people, 3.044 million people in the same time. 1.1 million more jobs, but we imported more than 3 million people in that same time period. And that's a time where we have this huge pressure on jobs. This chart shows UK vacancies from 2022, September 2022, down to September 2025. You can see that is going steeply down. That is UK job vacancies declining. And what this is doing is it's putting pressure on the jobs market, increasing competition. Okay, a lot of people with these master's degrees entering the workforce. And then what we see is all of that being pushed down, lots of people being pushed out into universal credit. So this shows universal credit from 2022 to 2025 in July, okay? And what we saw is from 5.5 million all the way up to 8.3 million within 3.5 years. And all of this is made worse by diversity, equity, inclusion, which I've experienced myself and I know for a fact is discriminating against native citizens. So we have these DEI policies that will ensure equality, okay? And it will basically prioritize people who are non-native, okay, ethnicity, etc. So it just makes it all worse and more difficult for native citizens. Essentially, what's happening is that our higher education system isn't properly funded. We've gone from a situation multiple decades ago where higher education was effectively free for a lot of people to a situation where the whole thing is funded based on international students coming into the UK and then paying these exorbitant fees. But really, they're paying for a route into the UK job market, into becoming British citizens. That's what those fees actually are. And our entire higher education system is based on that financing. But then we see the knock-on effect of that kind of impact, that benefit that we call education exports. And if you just looked at education, you think this is great, we're getting loads of money coming in. But then we see the results of that appearing in other places in the economy that I've shown. So on pressures in the job market, and in many other ways pushing people into universal credit, and then money going out of the country to pay Indian debt, stuff like that. This is all part of a flawed model. It's wrong, okay? And we've been sold a lie for decades. Effectively, what I've found repeatedly, and will go through in this video series, is that when people look at immigration from an economic standpoint, they imagine that the jobs and all of that income just materializes and there's no negative consequence. They don't think that maybe native citizens are being displaced. They think that every job taken by an immigrant is just a brand new job and that money wouldn't have existed if they weren't in the country. Essentially, they look at the debit side, but they don't look at the credit side for the accountants out there. And this report here is a really great example of this flaw, okay? So this is written by people, by the way, who are incentivized. They exist in this industry. Their salaries are paid basically based on these international student school fees, right? And they do this analysis and they say that non-EU migrants benefit the economy by £96,000 each, and then EU migrants £125,000, massive benefit, right? So the government then sees this, and by the way, they say, oh, please, we really want the government to take this seriously and look at this. This is serious analysis. These are educated people, okay? So basically what happens is the government looks at it, and then over many years they say, well, this is just a great benefit. Let's maximize that. Let's compete against other countries, bring as many people as we possibly can in, because they're this amazing benefit of 100,000 a year for each one. Yes, please, let's have loads of that. And the result is a chart like this, just going up and up and up and up and up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out some of the flaws in that report. Yes, I read it and I looked through and thought about it and considered it. I'm going to have to read some of this, so please bear with me. So it states 96,000 for non-EU migrants. That's a net cost benefit, yeah? It's a net economic benefit to the United Kingdom for each student. It looks only at the tuition fees paid, the money spent in the economy, and then the eventual income tax, etc. So what it's doing is, it's looking at, we've got this money coming in to pay the tuition fees, we've got this income that's being earned while they're working and it's being spent in the economy, they're paying rent, so this is all on the plus side, right? And then when they look at the downside, they just look at like NHS costs and costs like that. So they look at what the potential costs from the state are to support those students. So that's how they do that net figure of 96,000. But they don't consider whatsoever that maybe that person coming in is taking jobs from people who are already citizens in the UK, and what the impact of that is on the economy. That's what's hidden, and that's what's causing the problems that we've got. The report also doesn't look into the finance that's being provided by India, for example, to those students to come here that's then going out of the UK, that interest that I said. So they're not looking at that. They didn't consider that at all. This is a very long, detailed report, and they didn't consider that at all. And I've been looking into this as a YouTuber, and I saw it straight away. What's going on, huh? Maybe they're incentivized not to see it. And you're left with this question. If this all worked, if all of these economic models really worked, well, we've run migration at historically unprecedented levels, all sorts of migration. We're even finding new kinds and we're bringing those up, amplifying those as well, yeah? But if the international students were a boon to the economy, and if all other types of migrants were as well, well, we would be doing amazingly well economically right now, and we see the exact opposite of that. So they are wrong. Because what we actually see is an economy that is on the brink. Our national debt is extremely high. Our government deficit is ridiculous and unsustainable. Our government, by the way, basically spends £337 million extra, right, than it takes in every day since Labour took office. Every day they're spending £337 million that they don't have. They borrow it and then they pay interest on it. It is escalating and it's gonna implode. It's gonna explode actually, okay? I focused on India a lot in this video, okay, but the same or similar is true. I didn't have time to go through every single country, but I'm sure the same is true for Nigeria, Pakistan, China, many other countries, right? So the thing is that India are incentivized to do this. They have a lot of people, a lot of intelligent people, a lot of people who want to make their lives better and want to move to a high living standard country. So the government is incentivized to give them money, and then they'll just take interest, right? So they have a surplus of people. Let's just get them going out, and then we'll get money from them paid back into India. So there's an incentive structure there. Great play by India, by the way. And I really want to make the point that this isn't anything against people from India, because they're making the most of the opportunities that they have. A lot of them are in really difficult conditions. They're doing the best for them and their children. Good for them. Of course, they should do that, right? My issue is that our government is not doing the right thing. They're not looking at what's best for British citizens. And just by the way, this may be irrelevant, but I'm a big fan of India overall. Indian philosophy, food, people, the whole culture. I love it. I think it's vibrant. Hinduism, and I've been into like Indian philosophy, the genius of, the spiritual philosophy for the Advaita and the Rig Vedas, etc. Anyway, I won't go on, but just know that this is coming from that context. Nevertheless, you got to look at the data, and you got to basically figure out why things are broken and then try to fix them. Okay, so I hope that provided some insight. It's very difficult to get such complex topics across succinctly. I hope I did an okay job. So essentially, we've got this whole industry, okay, that is funded on debt from people coming from many different countries to the UK. And I think that is a great burden to our economy, not a boon, okay? I think it's basically taking jobs, putting pressure on locals, moving people into universal credit. It's not helping. Okay, if you watched all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't and you want to see the rest of this migration series, or check out my illegal migration series. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Also, please like the video if you found it valuable or entertaining in any way. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching again. Until next time, cheers.